Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. Welcome to this episode, in which I want to talk about how you maintain your credibility at an early stage of actually talking to builders. And I'd recommend that if you haven't already, that you go back and listen to podcast episode number 33, where I talked about different ways of finding builders. And if you go back into that episode, you'll hear me talking about networking meetings and recommendations and how we find builders by getting out and walking around the streets, and ultimately how now it's very easy to find builders on the internet, searching on Google and on social media and other places like that. But it doesn't matter how many builders we actually find, and you'll recall if you listened to that podcast episode that I talked about finding as many as we possibly can. It doesn't really matter how many we find. We need to be really careful that when we're engaging with them, that we actually come across as being a credible or a potentially credible client for them, because builders to a certain extent can pick and choose who they want to work with. At the moment, work is reasonably readily available. We're probably just in a reasonably normal market at the moment. We're not in a boom, but we're certainly not in a bust. Although some people would say we're not really going anywhere forward. From a building perspective, it is possible to find builders. But similarly, builders can, to a certain extent, also pick and choose who they want to work with. I mean, it's really important that we come over to builders in a credible way so that the builders are actually engaged enough to want to work with us rather than work with other potential clients that are out there. And the story I frequently tell here is that when I was engaged by building contracting businesses, particularly the last business I worked for, where I got to number 2 in the business, I worked there for 9 years or so in the end. Now, we were a reasonably well set up business. We weren't enormous. Our turnover fluctuated quite a lot, but it was probably somewhere around about 12 to 15 million pounds worth of building work in any year. We specialised in complicated projects. We specialised in reasonably small projects. We didn't do many projects over £1 million, but we did do lots of projects around about £400,000-500,000 at any one time. There was a team of surveyor estimator managers like myself that delivered the projects. We had a team of estimators. We had admin support. We had managers that would manage the projects, from a foreman all the way up to senior site managers, depending on the complexity of the projects. And we had a number of our own tradesmen as well. So we could turn our hands to most things. We had resources to be able to pretty much take on any project that ticked the boxes within our geographical area, the types of projects we did, and the size of projects we did. And yet we would turn projects away sometimes. And typically, if we were approached by a potential client that we thought was not able to articulate what they wanted particularly well, then we would say to that client, "I'm really sorry, we are too busy." Now, in reality, we were never too busy, but it was so easy to say, "Really sorry, at the moment, we're too busy." And the reason for that was invariably because that potential client had not come across as being someone that was credible, someone that we wanted to work with. And our concern was, if a client can't suitably tell us what they want, then how are we ever going to be able to price that? How are we ever going to deliver that? How are they going to know if we've delivered what they didn't know they didn't want in the first place, etc.? So you can see where that leads to. So I'm just going to go into a little bit more depth about making sure and helping you ensure that you maintain your credibility here. So one of the massive mistakes that I see property investors making on a regular basis, and in fact, I had received a message yesterday from someone who is about to do this same thing now. It is that property investors engage with builders when they don't own the property. And the common thing here is they've seen a property, it needs a refurbishment. So the first thoughts are, well, I need to get a builder around there to give me a price. Now, builders that turn up at that point, if you can get them to turn up, because some builders will ask if you own the property and refuse to get involved and refuse to come and view it if you don't own the property, because they're now thinking, well, if this potential client doesn't actually own the property, then first of all, they've got to buy the property before the whole project goes forward. And then they're probably going to get some competitive prices, at which point I'm back in a melee of 3 or 4 other contractors, and as a result may not win the project. So the first obstacle is this potential client has got to buy the property before they're going to engage with me properly as a client. And secondly, this potential client has now put, or I've got to win competitively against the other clients or the other builders that this potential client is talking to. So you're going to find that builders are less engaged with you if you don't own the property. So if you show them the property and there's a for sale sign outside, a lot of builders are not going to engage with you. Some of those builders will go in a couple of different ways. Some of those builders will kind of think, well, it doesn't really matter what kind of price I give. It's too far down the line. There's no specification, there's no drawings. So really, any price I give would be so woolly that if I give a really low price later on, I can say, well, actually, I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. There's nothing written down. There's no clarification. So I can get out at a later date if I want to. Or alternatively, some of these builders will think, well, I might as well just give a belt and braces coverall type price that gets me in and gets me out as quickly as possible, because again, the chances of me getting this are pretty slim. So you potentially end up with a low price, in which case you make an offer that's far too low and you catch a cold later on when you can't deliver for that price, or you get a high price which isn't worth anything because now you make an offer that's far too far too low, and as a result you can't you don't get your offer accepted. So my advice is there is no point in taking builders to see properties that you don't own. My advice is that you really need to learn how to budget projects separately, and that's a totally different training course that I've got, and you're welcome to talk to me about that at some point. But just using builders to give you technical advice on projects is wrong. Builders do not have those skills per se. They will often talk a good job, but they don't actually understand the technical side of these things. And I have unfortunately worked with so many property investors who have got some advice from builders that is woefully incorrect. And even only yesterday, I was working with a client who had a budget from a builder for doing some work that had some significant errors in it, because that builder did not understand the regulations relating to HMOs, and particularly didn't consider the ramifications of the fire regulations. So you really need to be talking to a consultant at this point rather than a builder. But significantly, if any builders that come out of this stage and give you prices based on woolly information, bearing in mind you won't have schedule of works and you won't have drawings, they're probably not the builders you want to be working with. The credible builders are most of the time not going to come out and help you too much at this stage. So another little story. I worked with a client a good number of years ago. He asked me if I could help him find some builders for a particular project that he was ready to move forward with, and I was able to do that. In fact, one of my team was able to do that. I asked this client, were there any builders that he felt we should appoint? Sorry, were there any builders he felt that we should approach, or were there any builders he felt we shouldn't approach? And he actually gave us a list of about 6 or 7 builders that he didn't feel we should approach because that they messed him around in the past, which was an interesting thing because when we looked at this project, it was in quite a small town, in quite a rural area. And what had actually ended up happening, the 7 or 8 builders he told us not to approach were all of the local builders. So all of the builders based in this fairly small town, he told us not to approach. And I went back and asked him what the background was, and he said, "Well, I've approached them so many times. Now they won't talk to me about this project. I've been looking at this project for so many years that I've needed so much help that none of these builders will actually talk to me anymore." So we ended up having to find builders from other towns, other more local towns that he could approach to get his pricing now that he was at the point where he had a proper schedule of works and proper drawings. He kind of burnt his bridges with all of the local builders in the early days, just getting information and advice from them, all for free, of course. And now it got to the point where none of them would actually price the project for him in the first place. So do be very careful showing builders properties that you don't own. Let's jumping in to make sure that you have everything you need. Now, in a number of these podcasts, you would have heard me talk about my community, and I want to ensure that you know how you can join that community. Obviously, within these podcasts, there's a limit to the detail I can go into the recording, and of course, a lot of things are very generic. So what if you had access to join me on a Zoom call for 90 minutes every single week in a group coaching environment? You could get your questions answered whenever they come up and learn from other members' questions. Plus, you also get 10 hours of training videos, an HMO refurbishment case study, some sample documents and checklists that will help you run your projects far more effectively. Membership of my community is just £89 a month. You get the first month free, and you can also cancel anytime after that. Plus, as a listener of this podcast, there's a promo code to help you save £20 every single month that you remain a member. So just make a note of VIP discount 20, VIP discount 20, all in capital letters, and put that into the checkout. You'll find the checkout on my website, www.refurbishmentmastery.com. Scroll down the page, you'll find the link for the Project Management Accelerator. Use the promo code VIP discount 20 and you'll be signed up at just £69 a month. We look forward to seeing you in that community very, very soon. Now back to the podcast. Ultimately, you need to come across as being professional. I know a lot of you that listen to this podcast have spent money getting educated to understand more about property investment. Some of you have even spent money learning more about how to deliver refurbishment projects. And thank you to those of you that have spent your money and put your trust in me. You need to demonstrate that you understand what your property needs to be at the end of the day. You shouldn't be leaving any decisions for the builder to make for themselves. You should know what your investment property needs to look like at the end of the day. And ultimately, that is the schedule of works. And I've spoken about schedules of works in other podcast episodes and the kinds of things to get into your schedule of works. If you don't know what your HMO looks like at the end of the day, I guarantee the builder doesn't either. Because if a builder has done some work on an HMO in the past, who's to say that that HMO is to the same standard or quality or styling as what you actually need? Who's to say that those regulations are even current or relevant for your investment area? So you need to tell them what you need in your HMO or any other project that you actually do. And you do that by putting together a schedule of works and setting out exactly what makes your property stand out from the other properties that are being refurbished and converted around you. And there's other podcasts where I talk about schedules of work. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. The usual thing I say is if you look around the room that you're in at the moment, you will see lots of elements of that room that have got multiple options as far as door styles, ironmongery, floor finishes, paint colours, types of electric faceplates, types of radiators. And then if you were to walk into the kitchen, you'll realise there's lots of different styles of kitchen as far as door colours, as far as worktop styles, splashbacks, sinks, appliances. And then if you walk into the bathroom, you'll see similar things in there that you need to be making some a selection of. You need to make the choice. You shouldn't be leaving any of that for your builder at all, because any builder that feels the schedule of works is missing or indeed is wishy-washy is going to be slightly less inclined to work for you than other clients. And sadly, the builders that will work with those wishy-washy schedules of works are by and large the builders that you don't want to be working with, the builders that will cause you problems later on down the line. And of course, if anything's wishy-washy, you are more likely to get yourself into some kind of conflict. And the smart builders will not get involved with something where they think there is a chance of there being some conflict further down the line. Now, the other thing I want to say here about how you maintain your credibility relates to drawings. There are two types of drawings loosely that you're going to come across when you're working in construction with construction projects. The first type are the planning drawings, and the second type are the building regulation drawings. Now, the planning drawings are concept. They are the concept that we've got this big house and we like to carve it up into 3 flats. And this drawing needs to go to the planners to demonstrate how we're going to split it up into 3 flats, to demonstrate that those 3 flats comply with the minimum space standards, to demonstrate that those 3 flats meet the local amenity standards, perhaps as far as bin storage and bicycle storage and off-road parking and a garden or amenity space. Whatever those standards are, those drawings demonstrate all of that. Those drawings and those elements I've just explained to you have no benefit to builders at all. Builders can't build from those drawings. What the builders need are building regulation drawings. The building regulation drawings set out how this property is going to be delivered and the work that's going to be required to comply with the building regulations. So when we take down the wall to open up that space, what is the steel that's going to hold that floor up? What is the size of the steel? How do we bed the steel? How do we treat the steel to make sure that if there's a fire, it is protected and isn't going to distort and the building collapse? So those details don't actually need to be on the planning drawings. The planning drawing might show that the wall is taken down, but nothing more than that. The detail it relates to the steel. The other things that are going to be on there are things like how we separate the 3 flats acoustically to comply with the sound regulations, how we have a safe means of fire exit in the case of a fire. what we need to have in the way of fire alarms, possibly in some circumstances, sprinklers as well, how we install, how we bring in new electric services and make sure that they're installed correctly. Amongst other things, there's lots of other elements that are needed to be able to deliver a project that is compliant with the building regulations. And that information is on drawings provided by architects and nearly always structural engineers as well. So you need to have those drawings before you're engaging with builders. So if you're showing builders planning drawings, they have got no idea how to deliver this project in a compliant way. So they are guessing. Those that guess are the ones that you probably don't want to be working with. Those that walk away, unfortunately, are the ones you probably do need to be working with. And the very best builders will say, I can help you. I can give this to my architect. I can recommend an architect to get this information for you. I can recommend a structural engineer to get this information for you. And some of the very best builders will write schedules of work for you to verify that there is clarity around what they are actually going to deliver for you. But a lot of the time, those builders' prices are going to be a little bit higher because they have had to do more work for you and they have been more diligent and more thorough in most cases. Those prices are going to be higher. Those are the builders that will, by and large, give you breakdowns of prices, whereas those that won't are primarily either the wrong builders to be working with, or they're saying, look, you haven't given me much information, so how can I give you much information? So the better you come across, the more credible you come across the builders, the more professional you look to the builders, the more likelihood you are going to get the right builders pricing your project, and you are going to actually get proper prices submitted for your project in the first place. And as I say, as much as you can do your own due diligence and research into finding the right builders in the first place, believe me, builders are doing their own due diligence and research into you. And those builders that don't return prices or say that they're too busy or suddenly are going on holiday, if there's a lot of that going on, that may indicate that you're not coming across to builders in a credible way, and they're feeling that they don't actually want to engage with you on this particular project. Now, if work gets really, really scarce, that's a little bit less likely. But if work gets quite, if the business, if the market gets quite busy and builders get quite busy, then they're going to start picking and choosing. So whilst we're in a fairly stable market at the moment, I would encourage you to get your processes right, learn how to do all of this properly, so that when the market gets a little bit busier, you've still got there are still builders out there that want to work with you because you can demonstrate that you are credible. So really, this goes back to back, as I said, with podcast 33, because it doesn't matter how good the potential builders are. If you're not coming across as credible, the good builders will not want to work with you. And just as I did, or we did when I was employed in the last business I worked for, which was now quite a number of years ago, 14 years ago or so, we would pick and choose who we wanted to work for. Builders will do that with you if you don't come across as credible. So I really hope that this episode has just given you a little bit of an overview as to how you can be more credible when you're engaging with builders. I wish you all of the best with that process and look forward to catching up with you on another podcast.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.